Hello and welcome. You're watching Gravitas. I am Molly Gambhir. Here's what's lined up for you on the show tonight. It is an election that has been closely watched around the world. The battle for the US Congress is right down to the wire. With the Democrats and the Republicans hanging on to hopes of winning narrow majorities, it is a race that's too close to call. A referendum on Joe Biden and a contest that directly impacts Donald Trump's ambitions. On Gravitas tonight, we get you up to speed with the trends and we go beyond the numbers. Why do these elections matter? How do they impact the 2024 presidential race? Why should you care about the results? That's our top focus in this edition.
We will be in the majority and Nancy Pelosi will be in the minority.
We jam them up. We held the line. I never expected that we were going to turn these red counties blue.
We will never, ever surrender to the woke mob. Florida is where woke goes to die.
Tonight, we must recommit ourselves to the cause of our country, to the communities we live in, and to our neighbors.
It's a difficult day for poll pundits in America. The votes are still being counted. Few key trends are clear, but in some of the seats, the races are simply too close to call. Let's bring you up to speed with what's happening. Now, let me be clear from the start, the final results are yet to be announced. What we have for now are trends. The Republicans are leading the race for the House of Representatives. They are in a good position. The majority mark is 218. The Republicans are ahead in 199 seats. The Democrats, 172. The counting continues for several seats. The battle to control the Senate is on a knife edge. The majority mark being 51. Democrats, 46. Republicans, 47. Why is it taking so much time to declare the results? Well, millions of votes were sent by post. Those mail-in ballots need to be counted by hand. So it might take a few more days before we have the final results.
So it is entirely possible that we do not have a full picture of the numbers for a number of days. And that is a good thing. It doesn't mean that something's wrong. It means that something is right. It means we're taking a moment to count every ballot. And let's remember, there are some states that can't even begin to start counting until today. So a delay is not nefarious. It doesn't show any sort of fraud. It shows that the system is working according to the law in that state. You don't want to rush this.
So that's why it will take time. However, we can pick up some signals from these trends. So far, there are three clear takeaways. Number one, the Republicans will likely control the House. We showed the numbers to you earlier. They speak for themselves. What we don't know yet is the margin of the victory. Will the Republicans have a strong majority or will they get ahead by a thin margin? Experts say it will most likely be a thin majority even if the Republicans win the House.
At this point, we're not sure exactly who's going to be in control of Congress, either the House or the Senate. There are a lot of races where counting is close, and we haven't been able to determine exactly which party is going to have the leg up in either chamber. But it's clear that if we do go into this next session of Congress with a slim majority on either side, It will continue to be contentious. There will be hard-fought debates on any number of issues.
And that brings me to takeaway number 2. There is no red wave. Earlier, many pundits had hinted that the Republicans will sweep these elections and the Democrats could lose a huge number of seats. Well, that has not happened. The Democrats have managed to flip key counties that voted Republican before. And one of the biggest upsets for the Republicans is Pennsylvania. There, John Fetterman has defeated Mehmet Oz. Oz is a TV host and heart surgeon who was endorsed by former President Donald Trump.
We launched this campaign almost 2 years ago, and we had our slogan. It's on every one of those signs right now. Every county, every vote. Every county, every vote. And that's exactly what happened. We jammed them up. We held the line. I never expected that we were going to turn these red counties blue, but we did what we needed to do, and we had that conversation across every one of those counties. And tonight, that's why I'll be the next U.S. Senator from Pennsylvania.
The dust is yet to settle, though, but some of the most radical expectations have been shattered. What about Joe Biden? What are the takeaways for him? Well, the American president seems to be preparing for challenging times ahead. Takeaway number 3 being the potential loss of majority for the Democrats. They were controlling both chambers of the U.S. Congress, and that made it easier for President Biden to push his legislative agenda. And this could change if the present trends hold. The Democrats seem to be prepared for the loss. Reports have emerged. Advisors to the U.S. president are acknowledging privately that the majority in the House is slipping away. The battle for the Senate looks tough as well. The Democrats would be desperate to hold on to their majority there because if they lose in both chambers, Joe Biden will be a lame duck president for the next 2 years. And guess who is waiting in the wings to seize the moment? Former President Donald Trump.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. This has been a very exciting night. We have some races that are hot and heavy, and we're all watching them here. The numbers have been amazing so far. Now, this is just up until this point. But as of this moment on endorsements, with the nominations, we had a total of 330 endorsements on nominations. This is only on nominations. This isn't for tonight. And of the 330, we won 200. We won 324.
Is that really the case? Who is really winning this midterm contest? Let's bring in our guest tonight. Well, the pollsters expected Republicans to do better. The Democrats have performed better than expected. For those reactions, let's get in from Washington, D.C. Nicole Brenner-Schmitz, a Democratic strategist. And from Atlanta, Julianne Thompson, a Republican strategist. Nicole, let me begin with you. What's the mood looking like in the Democratic camp? We have been getting reports of advisors to the American president acknowledging privately that the majority in the House seems to be slipping away.
Well, look, we always knew that a midterm election with a party in control of all three branches was going to be very difficult. But even if the House does go to the Republicans, and we've got a lot of seats to still count those ballots in, we certainly didn't see a red wave. We didn't see them take hundreds or dozens of seats. This has been a great night for the Democrats. They've got new Democratic trifectas in multiple states. We're still looking at a Senate that we could possibly hold. We've always known that Georgia had a likelihood of going to a runoff, working hard to try to cross that 50%, but prepared to go until December 6th. This has been a successful midterm for the Democrats, no matter how you slice it.
Right. Pollsters expected Republicans to do better. The Democrats have performed better than expected. Julianne, what's your reaction to that? And what do these numbers mean for the Republicans?
Well, I do think that Republicans had a great night, although it was not a red wave. It's still looking like Republicans are going to seize control of the House of Representatives. And it looks like ground zero for the Senate is going to be the state of Georgia. Both parties needed 5 to win control of the Senate, with the Democrats taking Colorado, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, and Arizona. The Republicans taking North Carolina, Ohio, Nevada, and Wisconsin in the swing states, which leaves us with Georgia, which is the state that I live in, and the race between Herschel Walker and Raphael Warnock. So just as back in 2021, we have now both parties and really the entire country that's going to be coming down to Georgia. All eyes are going to be on the contest here, because that is going to determine who controls the Senate. So although it was not a red wave, I think it's a stretch to say it was a great night for Democrats. I don't think it was a great night for them. I think it was a good night for Republicans, but as the other guest stated, there was certainly not a red wave, although there was here in Georgia, with us winning all of our statewide elected seats and Governor Kemp winning re-election over Stacey Abrams by a huge margin. Back in 2018, he won by around 55,000 votes, and this year he won by almost 400,000 votes. So I think that the people of Georgia have spoken loud and clear, and I think that the momentum is on the side of the Republicans going into the runoff for Senate.
Nicole, the introspection will soon begin in both camps. What would you say, as of now, has worked in favor of Joe Biden, and what, according to you, seems to have not worked in his favor?
Well, look, Democrats were focused very clearly. We wanted to make sure that the electorate understood what the administration has been doing, things like passing the largest infrastructure bill that we've ever seen, a promise Joe Biden made on the 2020 campaign, passing the Inflation Reduction Act, making sure that they understand that corporations are at 70-year record high profits, which is part of the inflation problem. Unemployment is down, and talking about how there isn't a plan on the other side of the aisle except to deny elections and pass a national abortion ban, which Kevin McCarthy promised that they would do if they were in charge. I don't know how many times Americans have to be clear. It was on the ballot in Kansas. It was on the ballot in Michigan just now, last night. Americans don't want to see these freedoms taken away from them, and they're going to vote on those too. Democrats were able to walk and chew gum, talk about the economy and issues of making sure that this continues to be a country where people can live their full lives with all of their constitutionally protected freedoms.
Right, Julian, I'm going to let you respond to that. And let me also ask you, the Republican camp, how does it plan to capitalize on the gains, also learn from the losses that will unfold over the next few hours? And do they serve as a boost for Donald Trump to announce a 2024 run?
Well, first, let me address the messaging issue. You need look no further than to award-winning, campaign-winning Democratic legend strategist James Carville, who was on MSNBC last night and talked about the fact that he felt that the reason that the election was not going well for Democrats, especially when it comes to the House of Representatives, is because of poor messaging, is because of the fact that they were talking about issues that do not pertain to conversations that happen around the American kitchen table, those kitchen table issues like the economy, like inflation, like the cost of gas, like being able to afford to buy a home with rising interest rates, that people cannot afford the same lifestyle that they had before. So James Carville was talking about that last night, and he was saying that Democrats, if they do not change their message, they're on a trajectory to continue to lose. And he actually pointed to people like Shapiro and Ryan as people who Democrats should be looking to when it comes to messaging, because they did focus their campaigns on the economy. And he feels that that's a winning message, and that that's something the Democrats are missing out on when they're talking about abortion and they're talking about climate change in an era when people can't afford to fill their car with gas. So when it comes to messaging, I believe Republicans won the night. When it comes to, you ask a question about Donald Trump seizing the moment. Look, you can look at last night many different ways, but one way that I look at last night and many Republicans are looking at last night is that the future of the we've seen the future of the Republican Party. And quite frankly, I think that the future of the Republicans' initials begin with RD. Ron DeSantis had a fantastic night last night. And there were a lot of insults that were thrown from the former president toward DeSantis, who remained classy and quiet throughout those insults and threats. And I think that it's as we're going into the 2024 election, it's going to be very interesting to watch. But Donald Trump is certainly not the only Republican that's going to be running for president, and certainly not the only strong contender. There's Ron DeSantis, there's Nikki Haley, there's possibly Senator Tim Scott, there's former Vice President Mike Pence. So there's going to be a lot of people, and it's going to be a very interesting race to watch as we go through 2023 and see who is going to be running for president on the Republican ticket in 2024. But I do think that Ron DeSantis is probably at the top of the list for major contenders when it comes to opposing the former president.
Right. Nicole, a quick reaction from you on that. And is the Democratic camp prepared for Donald Trump's potential announcement regarding a 2024 election bid?
Yeah, I think the Democrats are well prepared for that. That's been expected. He's been hinting at it. Former President Trump likes to keep the attention on himself. He's made it pretty clear that he's dangling this in front of the electorate over and over, and they feel confident in that. I mean, look, America soundly rejected former President Trump in 2020, embraced President Biden. We're moving forward on with his agenda. We've got 2 more years to do more good things, but I agree with the other panelists fully. Ron DeSantis is clearly at the top of the list if it's not Mr. Trump, and that seems to anger Donald Trump a lot. He threw out a lot of insults at the governor of Florida, and looks to be quite the infighting within the party that they'll be having. And I think the Democrats will sit back and let them sort their internal mess out and continue to try and pass policies that are good for the American people.
All right, Nicole and Julianne, appreciate very much for joining us here on the broadcast tonight. Thanks very much. Leaving it there.
Thank you.
And staying with that electoral battle, one of the biggest issues in this midterm election in the United States was reproductive freedom, a woman's right over her body, a woman's choice to undergo an abortion. Democrats banked on the issue to drive voter turnout and retain their control over the U.S. Congress. Their leader, Joe Biden, made lofty pledges, promises to protect reproductive rights. And how has his party fared on these promises? First things first, these polls coincided with 5 state referendums, 5 ballot initiatives on the right to abortion, whether it should be granted or restricted. Meaning when the voters went out to vote for both federal and state offices, they also weighed in on abortion, whether it should be enshrined in their state constitution or whether the right to abortion should be limited. Which 5 states were these? California, Michigan, Vermont, Kentucky, and Montana. All 5 of them held different legislative referendums. Out of them, California, Michigan, and Vermont held a vote to enshrine abortion rights in their respective state constitutions. Kentucky and Montana held a vote on limiting abortion rights. Let's start with Kentucky now. It held a referendum on amending its state constitution, a vote on whether the right to abortion should be repealed and state funding for abortion should be prohibited. The voters in Kentucky have sprung up a surprise. Despite being ruled by Republicans, they have upheld the right to choice. That's right. Kentucky voters have rejected the anti-choice ballot. According to reports, roughly 70% of the votes have been counted, and out of this, 54% voters have rejected the measure. Same story in California. It held a ballot called Proposition 1. The measure was essentially aimed at amending California's constitution and enshrining the right to reproductive freedom in it. And guess what? The voters in California have upheld this right. According to reports, 65% have voted in favor of the amendment, only 34% have voted against it. This will essentially change the process of abortion in the state. It will remove the 24 weeks limitation for an abortion and grant people complete reproductive freedom. Next, we have Michigan. Its ballot initiative was called Proposal 3. It proposed similar reforms to the Constitution, namely forbidding prosecution for helping a pregnant woman, allowing the state to regulate abortion but not prohibit it, and grant women the right to make all decisions around pregnancy. Michigan as well has voted in favor of this amendment. They want abortion rights enshrined in their constitution. The vote will ensure that Michigan remains a haven for abortion access. Look at the support that it received. Over 55% people voted in favor of the amendment. Only 45% voted against it. And these are figures as of this evening. Next, we have Vermont. It held a referendum on establishing the right to personal reproductive autonomy. The referendum received overwhelming support from the voters. Look at the numbers. Over 77.5% voted in favor of that reform. 22.5% voted against it. And this is despite anti-abortion groups spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to convince the voters to vote no. Lastly, we have Montana, a traditional red state. It held a referendum on restricting the reproductive care. The voters there rejected it. According to reports, 53% of Montana voters have rejected the measure, while 47% have voted in its favor. What this means essentially is that abortion there in Montana is set to be decriminalized. What does this tell you? That voters across the United States want abortion rights to be protected. The vote may have been held in just 5 states, but it serves as a referendum on how opinions are changing across the country. Our next story is about Ron DeSantis, the man who has dealt a major blow to Donald Trump's 2024 election hopes. How exactly? We tell you over the next 3 minutes. First things first, who is Ron DeSantis? He is a firebrand Republican leader who serves as the governor of Florida, one of America's most politically important states, also the 3rd most populous state in the country. And DeSantis is set to rule it again. The Republican governor has won his re-election bid by defeating his Democratic challenger, Charlie Crist. DeSantis secured 59% of the votes, while his rival secured just 40%. Immediately after the results were declared, he appeared before a sea of supporters in Tampa, accompanied by his wife and children. He told the gathering that his fight had just started.
Florida has proved that it can be done. We offer a ray of hope that better days still lie ahead. I am proud of our achievements in this state. I am honored by your support, and I look forward to the road ahead. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race in this first term, and I have kept the faith. And I have only begun to fight. God bless you all. Thank you very much. Thank you for a historic landslide victory.
It indeed is a historic victory because it sets DeSantis up for a presidential run in 2024. He is a rising star in the grand old party. At the age of 44, he has managed to become the governor not once but twice. And by doing so, he has positioned himself for potential national ambitions, perhaps even a future bid for presidency. In other words, he could steal Donald Trump's limelight. In the run-up to the 2024 presidential race, many Republican supporters expect him to supplant Trump as GOP's official candidate. DeSantis has not said anything about this, but Trump has had a lot to say about this, and not in the best of words. In fact, Trump has warned Ron DeSantis against running for presidency. He was asked about this in an interview, And this is what he said, I'm quoting. I don't know if he is running. I think if he runs, he could hurt himself very badly. I really believe he could hurt himself badly. I don't think it would be good for the party. And that's not all. Trump even threatened Ron DeSantis that if he were to run for presidency, he would release some secrets about him. I'm not making this up. This is what Donald Trump said. I'm quoting again. I would tell you things about him that will not be very flattering. I know more about him than anybody, other than perhaps his wife. And it does not even end there. Trump has given Ron DeSantis a nickname, Ron the Sanctimonious. You must listen to this.
Now we're putting him up. We're winning big in the Republican Party for the nomination like nobody's ever seen before. Let's see, there it is. Trump at 71, Ron DeSanctimonious at 10%, Mike Pence at 7%. Oh, Mike's doing better than I thought. Liz Cheney, there's no way she's at 4%. There's no way.
That's classic Donald Trump. But the question is, why does he hate Ron DeSantis so much? We know he could kill his 2024 prospects, but is that the only reason here? Not really. You see, Ron DeSantis is a lot like Donald Trump. He channels the same rage as Trump. He believes in the same things as Donald Trump. And he envisions the same America as Trump. Only that DeSantis does all of this with more grace and poise. Plus, he was once a Trump loyalist who did everything that Donald Trump said. But of late, Ron DeSantis is acting less like Trump's disciple and more like his political competitor. And this has evidently upset Donald Trump. In fact, he's been telling his supporters that DeSantis was nothing without him, that he put him on the political map, and if he wants, he can bring him down. But DeSantis is in no mood to bend the knee. His refusal has, in fact, set the stage for a generation clash in the grand old party. On one hand is the 44-year-old Ron DeSantis. On the other is 76-year-old Donald Trump. And they are the two most important Republican leaders today. Their differences have set the part up for a test of loyalty. Leaders in the party are under pressure to take sides now. So are the party supporters. Listen to these voices.
I believe that it's clear that Governor Ron DeSantis is the new leader of the GOP, and that if we want to truly take back the White House and continue in this direction, Florida's clearly the roadmap.
And I think that DeSantis is kind of corny, but I think he's kind of like the Luke Skywalker of politicians. Like, he's not worried. He's kind of that last hope that he really isn't worried what anybody thinks, and he's willing to do what needs to be done for his people and for his state.
What does this tell you? That despite being a newcomer, Ron DeSantis is slowly rising to national prominence. People are calling him the new leader of the GOP, the Luke Skywalker of politicians. Naturally, Donald Trump is not able to digest this. He wants to remain unchallenged within the Republican Party, which is why he is attacking DeSantis left, right, and center. But will his efforts bear any fruit? Only time will tell. And here is what the midterms will certainly impact. That's America's approach towards Russia. The Republicans want Joe Biden to take a tougher line against Russia, but Washington still does not want to shut the door for engagement. Here is an example of that. Officials of the US and Russia are talking again. What's the purpose behind this dialogue? Both sides want to resume inspections of atomic weapons sites.
START Treaty's Bilateral Consultative Commission, the BCC, that's the bilateral mechanism for discussing treaty implementation issues under the New START Treaty. We have agreed that the BCC will meet in the near future under the terms of the New START Treaty. The work of the BCC is confidential, but we do hope for a constructive session.
What is this all about? Let me explain. This dialogue is about the START Treaty, that's short for the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty. It is a pact for nuclear arms reduction. To put it simply, the treaty is a way for both the US and Russia to reduce the number of nukes they can deploy against each other. The first version was signed in the 1990s. The talks on the issue were suspended after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Russia barred US inspectors from visiting its nuclear sites, and that's how both sides made sure that they were in compliance with the treaty. US inspectors paid visits to Russian nuclear sites and vice versa. Moscow blocked the last attempt by America in August this year, but on-site inspections have been suspended since March 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So what exactly is happening now? Efforts are underway to resume these inspections. The US and Russia are taking the first steps. Reports say officials from both sides will be meeting in Cairo soon. On the face of it, this might seem like a de-escalation. The nuclear rhetoric, especially from Russia in recent months, had intensified, so it might look like both the US and Russia are trying to dial down the tensions. But don't let the announcements confuse you. There is serious mistrust between the US and Russia.
We have seen nothing to indicate that the Russians are, at the present moment, willing to engage in good faith negotiations. There would be a number of ways the Russians could signal their willingness, their ability to engage in dialogue and diplomacy, good faith dialogue and diplomacy with Ukraine. One would be to stop the bombing of civilian targets, to stop pursuing infrastructure, to stop pursuing heating, water, electricity for the people of Ukraine. Another would be to stop with what appears to be at best indiscriminate targeting of residential areas.
So America clearly remains skeptical, but it is still willing to take the plunge. Why does the Biden administration want to talk to Russia? What is driving this engagement? Here is the US National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, with an explanation.
I believe that it is our responsibility to keep lines of communication open, even with our adversaries, so that at the end of the day, we can try to avoid the worst possible outcomes at a minimum and look for opportunities for more. I do believe that maintaining channels of communication is in the interest of the United States. I also believe it is in the interests of every country who is affected by this conflict.
Washington has apparently nudged Kiev to walk the same path. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has changed course. Earlier, he wanted Vladimir Putin to go out of power to start a peace dialogue with Russia. He seemed to have dropped that demand. Zelensky has imposed new but tougher demands for a dialogue. He wants Ukraine's territorial integrity to be restored, which means Russian forces stepping back, and Moscow reversing its annexation of Ukrainian regions. Zelensky has also demanded punishment for war criminals and financial compensation for all material losses.
Справжніх переговорів про мир. До таких переговорів, які ми неодноразово пропонували, і на які завжди отримували божевільні російські відповіді новими терактами, обстрілами чи шантажем. Ще раз. Відновлення територіальної цілісності, повага до статуту ООН, відшкодування усіх збитків, завданих війною, покарання кожного воєнного злочинця і гарантій, що це не повториться. Це абсолютно зрозумілі умови.
Russia is facing pressure from Europe and China as well. Recently, the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz was in Beijing. He met with the Chinese President Xi Jinping. Both the leaders sent out this message to Moscow.
President Xi and I agree that nuclear threats are irresponsible and highly dangerous. By using nuclear weapons, Russia would cross a line which the world community drew together.
And Russia is sending out messages as well. Russian diplomats in Vienna have been quite busy. They circulated another note at the International Atomic Energy Agency, or IAEA, the second one in a month. What does that note say? 2 paragraphs are worthy of attention. Here is the first one. The most immediate task is to avoid any military clash of nuclear powers. That implies Moscow is not looking for an escalation. But in the same breath, Russia also reserved its right to use nuclear weapons. Listen to this carefully. The Russian nuclear strategy allows it to hypothetically resort to nuclear weapons. That's classic Russian playbook. Moscow knows how to keep everyone guessing about its next move. Shifting focus for now, India is in talks with some countries to start trading in the Indian rupee. And according to a report, countries in Southeast Asia, Africa and Latin America have shown interest. How exactly will this happen? What is this all about? Our next report telling you more.
It's a major push to facilitate international trade transactions in Indian rupees. The Indian government today made changes to the foreign trade policy to allow for rupee settlement of international trade for export promotion schemes. The Indian Commerce Ministry cited the rise in interest in internationalization of the Indian rupee for the move. The changes mean benefits, incentives and fulfillment of export obligation under the foreign trade policy can be extended to export payments made in Indian rupees. This is in continuation of India's push for trading in the Indian rupee. In July this year, India's central bank, the Reserve Bank of India, had issued guidelines for overseas trade in Indian rupees. It had decided to put in place an additional arrangement for invoicing, payment and settlement of exports-imports in the Indian rupee. It was a significant move to allow trade between India and other countries in rupees. The aim was to promote the growth of global trade with emphasis on exports from India and to support the increasing interest of global trading community in the Indian rupee. How will this work? To settle trade transactions with any country, banks in India would open pass-through accounts of correspondent banks of the partner country for trading. A pass-through account lets customers deposit money on behalf of another bank. A correspondent bank holds a pass-through account on behalf of another bank. Indian importers can pay for their imports in the Indian rupee into these accounts. Earnings from imports can then be used to pay Indian exporters in the Indian rupee. Now, according to a report, India is in talks with some countries to start trading in the Indian rupee. Which countries? Sri Lanka, the Maldives and multiple Southeast Asian, African and Latin American countries. As per the report, nations in these parts have shown interest in opening special rupee pass-through or SRV accounts. Following the Russia-Ukraine war, Moscow has upped the supply of discounted crude to New Delhi. Russia, in fact, is the first to open a special rupee pass-through account. Given the Western sanctions on Russia post the Ukraine invasion, the country is off the SWIFT system too, which is used by banks for payments in foreign currency. So for Russia, trading in the Indian rupee is a natural choice for now, since other options may not be available. Now, India's push for trading in the Indian rupee is generating interest in other parts of the world as well. It's a move that would also partly help reduce India's dependence on the dollar for trade and indirectly boost the domestic currency. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Our next story is from Qatar, where the homophobic comments of one of the ambassadors of the FIFA World Cup renewed the debate around sports washing. A former Qatari footballer recently said that homosexuality is quote-unquote damage in the mind. And also, it's haram or forbidden. Here's a report.
Sportswashing. Have you heard this term before? It means using sports to improve your global image. Using sports to divert attention from serious human rights violations. Saudi Arabia is accused of many such violations, like enforced disappearances or arbitrary detention. The kingdom is also accused of sportswashing these issues by hosting Grand Prix. So is China. Not too long ago, China hosted the Beijing Winter Olympics. It got the world to fly down to China and talk about the games, instead of the genocide in Xinjiang. Qatar, too, is accused of sportswashing. The country is counting down to host the FIFA World Cup. For the first time ever, the mega sporting event is being held in the Arab nation. Host Qatar wouldn't have it any other way. There are a lot of issues. Qatar would be happy to push under the carpet, like labor abuses. According to one estimate, over 6,500 migrant workers from Bangladesh, India, Nepal, Pakistan and Sri Lanka have died in Qatar since 2010. Nearly 30 of them died while working on World Cup infrastructure. Here's what Human Rights Watch says. There is documented proof of labor abuse in Qatar, including wage theft in World Cup-related projects. Homophobia is another big issue. Qatar outlaws homosexuality. In fact, homosexuality can be punishable by death in this country. Now, an ambassador of the Qatar World Cup has told a German media outlet that homosexuality is a quote-unquote damage in the mind. The ambassador, whose name is Khalid Salman, said those coming to Qatar for the World Cup should accept the country's rule. He went on to call homosexuality a haram. You know, something that's forbidden. So when he was asked why, Salman said it's because homosexuality is damage in the mind. In Qatar, a person who's homosexual can be stoned to death. But the country insists that fans across orientations will be safe here. What's more, when billions across the world watch the mega event being live-streamed from Qatar, it will be nothing but positive coverage for the Arab country. People will be talking about the swanky stadiums, about Qatari hospitality. Rarely will they mention Qatar's human rights record. Now that's what sports washing is all about, and it's something that's back on the table following the controversial interview.
How far can you go to please the society? Rather, how far should you go? The society always wants you to fit a certain template. If you are a man, you must be tall, at least taller than your partner, they say, or be tall enough to find a partner. Now, expectations like these and the urge to meet them are driving people to their limits. Since we are talking about height with regard to men, did you know that men around the world are signing up for leg lengthening surgeries? You heard that right. Leg lengthening surgeries. That sounds self-explanatory, except the procedure is long, painful, and expensive. What do these surgeries entail? They involve breaking your legs and then making them longer. The process involves weeks of immobility, spending time in a wheelchair. It also requires physiotherapy, and then there is immense pain because both your legs are practically broken. Coming to the cost now. Becoming taller can cost you up to $275,000 in the United States. In the UK, this can cost around £70,000. And then there are smaller clinics in countries like Turkey that promise to make you taller for $50,000. People don't mind paying that much. A person told a British media outlet that he worked 80 hours every week, even took a loan to pay for the leg lengthening surgery. And what's interesting is that limb lengthening surgeries have been around for decades now, but they were never meant to be used to fit into societal templates. Limbs would be fitted with rods to help accident victims walk again, or to save soldiers from amputation, or to help children who were born with deformities like legs of different lengths. But today, people are voluntarily going in for these painful procedures because they want to fit in. They want to please the society and avoid stigma, like the stigma of being too short or monolid. Leg lengthening is one of the many painful cosmetic procedures people are opting for. I mentioned monolid, something that's a racial trait and identity for many, yet in many societies, being monolid is considered undesirable. So people go in for cosmetic procedures to change the way their eyelids look. The process is called blepharoplasty, and it can cost you up to $3,000. There are also surgeries to change the shape of your nose, your chin, the lips, your breasts. I know a lot of you are thinking, isn't it a personal choice, to go in for these surgeries or procedures? Sure it is. My point is, there are people who are opting for these surgeries because they want to fit in, and that is where it becomes problematic. If it were really a matter of choice and choice only, I wonder how many people would have chosen to spend weeks on a wheelchair or to be immobile. Think about it. How many people do you think choose pain? Most of us shudder at the thought of injections and vaccinations, leave alone signing up to get one's legs broken and working round the clock so that you can pay someone $250,000 to break your legs one by one. For starters, the overemphasis on a person's look. It's not unusual for people to be mocked for being too short, too fat, too dark. Like I was saying, the society has a template which one must fit into to be called good looking or tall enough. In today's world of incessant selfies, swipes and likes, it seems to have become all the more important to fit this template and to pass the society's look test. Do you agree? Let us know. Let's now tell you what else made news around the world. Time for Gravitas Global Headlines.
COVID-19 cases continue to surge as Beijing battles a rebound in infections, despite stringent curbs. Millions of residents in the manufacturing hub of Guangzhou were tested for COVID-19 as infections topped 2,000 for 2 days running in the city's worst outbreak. UK High Court orders fugitive diamond businessman Nirav Modi's extradition to India, where he will face charges of fraud and money laundering amounted to an estimated $2 billion. North Korea fired at least one ballistic missile, according to Seoul's military. The latest launch from Pyongyang follows a record-breaking testing blitz earlier this month. An earthquake in western Nepal killed at least 6 people, 4 of them children, as tremors destroyed mud and brick houses in remote communities living in the foothills of the Himalayas. Facebook owner Meta will lay off more than 11,000 of its staff. Mark Zuckerberg says the cuts represent 13% of Meta's workforce. Kenya Airways pilots return to work after a court orders them to end their days-long strike that led to hundreds of flight cancellations, resulting in thousands of stranded passengers. Australian police say Sri Lankan cricketer Danushka Gunatilaka choked and sexually assaulted a woman he met on a dating app. The woman says she feared for her life during the date. The Nobel Peace Prize medal awarded to South Africa's last apartheid president, late F.W. de Klerk, was stolen from his Cape Town home 6 months ago, his foundation reveals. Pakistan storm into the final of the T20 World Cup after a 7-wicket victory over New Zealand at the Sydney Cricket Ground. The 2009 champions were clinical in all departments as they reached their 3rd T20 World Cup final. Arch rivals India or England await in the title clash. Senegal star Sadio Mane is likely to miss the FIFA World Cup following a leg injury he suffered in Bayern Munich's 6-1 win over Werder Bremen. The 30-year-old limped off the field just 20 minutes into the game.
With that, it's a wrap on this edition of Gravitas, leaving you with Gravitas images. Thanks very much for watching.
Ladies and gentlemen,